Every name has a story, and behind every story is a human life. This video is about one name that deserves to be remembered. In the small mining town of Chisholm, Minnesota, a 5-year-old girl vanished without a trace on a warm summer evening in 2003. And despite over 1,700 leads and a massive investigation spanning more than 2 decades, nobody knows what happened to LeeAnna Warner. This unsolved disappearance has haunted investigators, torn apart a family, and left a community searching for answers that may never come. Today we're diving deep into one of Minnesota's most heartbreaking missing child cases, exploring the strange events leading up to that June evening, the suspects who emerged during the investigation, and the mother who never stopped searching until her dying day. This is the story of LeeAnna Warner, a little girl who deserves to be remembered. June 14, 2003 started like any other summer Saturday in Chisholm. The town, with its population of just under 5,000 people, was the kind of place where kids still played outside until the streetlights came on and neighbors knew each other by name. LeeAnna Warner was spending the afternoon doing what 5-year-olds do, playing with friends in the neighborhood, enjoying the freedom of summer vacation. She had walked to a friend's house earlier that day, something her parents allowed because Chisholm felt safe, the kind of small town where people didn't lock their doors and children could be children. But that sense of safety was about to be shattered in a way that would change everything. Sometime between 5 and 5:15 in the evening, LeeAnna left her friend's house to walk home. She was barefoot, which wasn't unusual for a kid on a summer day. The walk was short, just a few blocks through a quiet residential area. Her parents expected her home soon, but LeeAnna never made it. She vanished somewhere along that short walk, disappearing so completely that despite an immediate and extensive search, not a single trace of her has ever been found. No clothing, no shoes, no evidence of what happened in those final moments. It's as if she simply ceased to exist between one house and another, swallowed up by something or someone in broad daylight. When LeeAnna didn't come home, her parents Christopher Warner and Kaylin Whitaker knew immediately that something was wrong. This wasn't a child who wandered off or got distracted. They called the police right away, and within hours, the small town of Chisholm was mobilized. Volunteers poured in from surrounding communities. Search parties combed through yards, parks, wooded areas, and abandoned mine pits that dotted the landscape around the old mining town. Helicopters flew overhead with thermal imaging equipment. Dive teams searched bodies of water. The FBI joined the investigation. Every resource available was thrown at finding this little girl, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. What makes LeeAnna's case even more disturbing are the strange things that happened in the days and weeks before she disappeared. Her mother, Kaylin, later told investigators about behavior that, in hindsight, seemed like warning signs of something terrible on the horizon. LeeAnna had started receiving toys and gifts from what she described as a little old lady. When her mother asked about these toys, LeeAnna couldn't or wouldn't provide clear details about who this woman was or where she had met her. The gifts kept appearing, and Kaylin grew increasingly uncomfortable, but in a small town where people were friendly and generous, it was hard to know if this was innocent kindness or something more sinister. Then there was the suitcase. Just days before her disappearance, LeeAnna packed a small suitcase with some of her belongings. When her mother discovered it and asked what she was doing, LeeAnna said she was getting ready to go somewhere. She wouldn't elaborate. She wouldn't explain. For a 5-year-old to pack a suitcase suggests someone had told her she was going on a trip, that someone had been talking to her, planning something. But who? And how had this person gained access to a child in a small town where everyone supposedly watched out for everyone else's kids? LeeAnna's behavior became even more unusual in those final days. She started sleeping in her closet instead of her bed. When her parents asked why, she didn't have an answer that made sense. Child psychologists who later reviewed the case noted that children sometimes hide or seek enclosed spaces when they feel unsafe, when they're trying to protect themselves from something they don't understand or can't articulate. Was LeeAnna afraid of something? Had someone threatened her? Had someone told her to keep secrets? These questions have haunted investigators and her family for over 20 years. The investigation into LeeAnna's disappearance quickly identified several persons of interest, and this is where the case takes some truly dark turns. The first major suspect was a man named Matthew Curtis. Curtis lived in the area and had been seen in the neighborhood around the time of LeeAnna's disappearance. When investigators looked into his background, they discovered he had a history that raised immediate red flags. Curtis was subsequently charged with possession of child pornography, charges serious enough that he was facing significant prison time. But before he could stand trial, before investigators could fully explore his potential connection to LeeAnna's disappearance, Matthew Curtis was found dead in his truck. The circumstances of Curtis's death were ruled a suicide, but the timing was suspicious enough that investigators couldn't help but wonder if he had taken his own life because he knew what was coming, because he couldn't face what he had done. Or perhaps because he knew that once he was in custody, once investigators really started digging, they would find evidence connecting him to LeeAnna. The problem is that dead men can't confess, and dead men can't lead police to missing children. If Matthew Curtis knew what happened to LeeAnna Warner, that knowledge died with him in that truck, leaving investigators with a promising lead that ended in a literal dead end. Another name that came up during the investigation was Joseph Duncan III, and if you know anything about true crime, that name should send chills down your spine. Duncan was a serial killer and child predator responsible for some of the most horrific crimes in recent American history. He kidnapped, tortured, and murdered multiple children across several states. When investigators learned that Duncan had some connection to Minnesota, they naturally wondered if he could have been involved in LeeAnna's disappearance. They investigated this possibility thoroughly, but ultimately determined that Duncan was not in the Chisholm area at the time LeeAnna vanished. While Duncan was a monster responsible for unspeakable evil, he apparently was not responsible for this particular tragedy. Duncan died in prison in 2021, taking the secrets of his other crimes with him, but LeeAnna's case was not among them. Witnesses reported seeing suspicious vehicles in the neighborhood around the time LeeAnna disappeared. Multiple people mentioned seeing unfamiliar cars driving slowly through the residential streets, vehicles that didn't belong to anyone in the area. Some witnesses described seeing a man or men in these vehicles who seemed to be watching children playing outside. In the immediate aftermath of LeeAnna's disappearance, investigators tracked down every single one of these reports, trying to identify the vehicles and their occupants. Some were explained away as innocent, people who had legitimate reasons to be in the neighborhood. Others were never identified at all, remaining as frustrating question marks in an investigation full of them. One of the most challenging aspects of this case is the sheer volume of information that poured in. Over 1,700 leads were called in to investigators over the years. 1,700 potential sightings, tips, theories, and pieces of information that all had to be tracked down and investigated. Some were clearly well-meaning but mistaken, people who thought they saw a child who looked like LeeAnna in a store or a park hundreds of miles away. Some were from psychics and self-proclaimed mediums offering their services. Some were from people with genuine information that seemed promising but ultimately led nowhere. And some, investigators believe, may have been from people who knew exactly what happened but were calling in false information to throw the investigation off track. The emotional toll on LeeAnna's family was devastating and never-ending. Her mother, Kaylin, became a tireless advocate for missing children, channeling her grief into action. She worked with organizations dedicated to finding missing kids and supporting their families. She kept LeeAnna's case in the public eye, giving interviews, organizing awareness events, and never letting people forget that her daughter was still out there somewhere, that someone knew something, that the case was not closed. Kaylin refused to give up hope, even as years turned into decades, even as the likelihood of finding LeeAnna alive diminished with each passing day. Christopher and Kaylin's relationship didn't survive the tragedy. The stress of having a missing child, the constant investigation, the media attention, the grief that never heals. It's more than most relationships can withstand. They eventually separated, but both remained committed to finding their daughter. They cooperated with investigators, participated in renewed search efforts whenever new leads emerged, and kept LeeAnna's memory alive in their own ways. The loss of a child is something no parent should ever have to endure, but the loss of a child who simply vanishes, who might be alive somewhere, who might be suffering, that's a special kind of hell that never ends. In 2022, Kaylin Whitaker passed away. She died without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. She died without closure, without answers, without justice. For 19 years she carried the weight of LeeAnna's disappearance, and she carried it until her last breath. When news of Kaylin's death spread through the true crime community and among those who had followed LeeAnna's case over the years, there was a collective sense of heartbreak. A mother who had fought so hard, who had never given up, who had deserved to know the truth, was gone. And LeeAnna, wherever she is, lost her mother a second time. The Chisholm Police Department and the FBI have never closed LeeAnna's case. It remains open and active as of 2025. Investigators still follow up on credible leads when they come in. Advances in technology, particularly in DNA analysis and digital forensics, offer new possibilities for solving cold cases. Evidence that was collected in 2003 can now be analyzed in ways that weren't possible back then. Investigators have hope that someday, somehow, a break will come. Maybe someone who was afraid to speak up 20 years ago will finally come forward. Maybe a deathbed confession will provide answers. Maybe evidence that seemed insignificant in 2003 will prove crucial when examined with modern technology. There are theories, of course. In any unsolved case, especially one involving a missing child, theories multiply and spread. Some people believe LeeAnna was abducted by someone she knew, someone who had been grooming her with those gifts from the mysterious little old lady, someone who convinced her to pack that suitcase because she was going on a special trip. This theory suggests premeditation, planning, a predator who had been working on gaining LeeAnna's trust for weeks or months before that June evening. Other theories focus on opportunistic abduction, a predator who happened to be in the right place at the right time and saw a vulnerable child walking alone. Some theories involve human trafficking, suggesting LeeAnna was taken and transported far from Minnesota to be exploited in ways too horrible to fully contemplate. The geographic location of Chisholm adds another layer of complexity to the case. The area is dotted with abandoned mines, deep pits filled with water, and vast stretches of forest. It's the kind of terrain where something or someone could be hidden and never found. Search teams covered as much ground as possible in the immediate aftermath of LeeAnna's disappearance, but the reality is that thoroughly searching every possible location in that region would take years and unlimited resources. There are places in those woods and mines where evidence could remain hidden forever, places where the earth has simply swallowed up secrets that will never be revealed. What happened to LeeAnna Warner? The truth is that nobody knows, and that uncertainty is what makes this case so haunting. She was 5 years old, just a little girl who should have grown up to go to school, make friends, fall in love, have a life. Instead, she's frozen in time as that barefoot 5-year-old walking home on a summer evening, forever missing, forever 5, forever lost. Her case represents every parent's worst nightmare, the fear that lives in the back of every mother and father's mind when their child is out of sight even for a moment. It's a reminder that evil exists, that predators walk among us, and that sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, the monsters win. If you have any information about the disappearance of LeeAnna Warner, please contact the Chisholm Police Department or the FBI. Even if you think what you know is insignificant, even if you're not sure it matters, call anyway. Sometimes the smallest piece of information is the one that breaks a case wide open. Someone out there knows something, someone saw something, someone heard something, and that someone could be the key to finally bringing LeeAnna home and giving her family the answers they've been searching for since 2003. LeeAnna would be 27 years old now if she's still alive. She'd be an adult, possibly with a family of her own, living a life that was stolen from her when she was just 5. But the reality that investigators and her family have had to accept is that the chances of LeeAnna being alive after more than 2 decades are extremely slim. The hope now is not for a joyful reunion, but for recovery, for answers, for the ability to lay her to rest properly, and to bring whoever took her to justice. That's what LeeAnna deserves. That's what her family deserves. That's what every missing child deserves. Cases like LeeAnna's remind us why we tell these stories, why we keep talking about missing children and unsolved cases, even years or decades after they happen. It's not about entertainment or morbid curiosity. It's about keeping these children in the public consciousness, about making sure they're not forgotten, about holding out hope that someone somewhere will hear the story and remember something crucial. Every time someone shares LeeAnna's case, every time someone talks about what happened in Chisholm that June evening, there's a chance that the right person will hear it, the person who holds the key to solving this mystery. The small town of Chisholm was forever changed by LeeAnna's disappearance. The innocence was shattered, the sense of safety destroyed. Parents became more protective, more fearful. Children lost some of their freedom. The community came together in the immediate aftermath, but the long-term impact of having an unsolved child abduction in your town is corrosive. It creates suspicion and fear. It makes people look at their neighbors differently. It's a wound that never fully heals, a scar on the collective memory of everyone who lived through it. LeeAnna Warner deserves to be more than a statistic, more than another name on a list of missing children. She was a real little girl with a personality, with favorite toys and favorite foods, with dreams about what she wanted to be when she grew up. She loved and was loved. She mattered. She still matters. And until the day comes when investigators can finally close her case with answers, we owe it to her to keep telling her story, to keep her memory alive, and to keep hoping that justice, however delayed, will eventually come. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and be kind to each other.